I'm attracted to older women, all because of Auntie Bisola. I could begin this story by talking about the weight of secrets I've carried for years. I could dwell on the turmoil, the confusion, and the silent guilt that followed me into adulthood. But instead, I'll start at the very beginning, where it all began with Auntie Bisola many years ago. It was during a 2-week school vacation. I had hoped to spend the holidays at home with my parents. After all, I had never spent a night outside our house before. My father, ever the overprotective parent, wouldn't let me out of his sight. Being their only child and the heir apparent to the Douglas Group of companies meant my well-being was their top priority. Years of childlessness before my birth had made them overly cautious. I still recall how Grandpa once requested I spend Christmas with him in the village. Dad had politely declined. But this time, my mom was adamant. I was to visit her younger sister, Bisola, who lived in Ibadan with her husband and 2 kids, Ella and Merlin. Ella was 2 years older than me, while Merlin and I were about the same age. That afternoon, I was sitting with my dad in the living room when Mom's voice called out from the kitchen. "Darling, I think we should let Yemi spend the holidays in Ibadan. Traveling is part of learning, you know." Dad, glued to an old football match, turned to respond. My love, Yemi is just 12 years old. Who's going to look after him in Ibadan?" "Bisola will take good care of him," Mom said, stepping into the room. "Besides, I don't want him growing up cold, or worse, as a mummy's boy." "My son isn't growing cold, or hot," Dad said firmly. But Mom had a way of bending Dad's will. She walked over to him seductively, tipped his head back, and kissed him deeply. "Let's not deny him this opportunity to bond with his cousins," she said softly. Dad sighed, thought for a moment, then turned to me. "Yemi, would you like to visit Ibadan?" "Yes, Daddy," I replied eagerly. "Fine. Go pack your bag. Mr. Segan will take you to your aunt's place this weekend." I was excited mostly because I'd get to see Merlin. The last time I saw him was during Grandpa's funeral. The following morning, Mom packed my bag with clothes, my favorite games, biscuits, and soft drinks. By 8 a.m. on Saturday, I was already dressed and ready to leave. "Yemi," Mom said, fumbling with the buttons on my shirt, "be a good boy and listen to your aunt." "Have I made myself clear?" "Yes, Mummy," I replied. She kissed my forehead, and Dad, who stood beside her, hugged me tightly. "Drive carefully," he instructed Mr. Segan, our family driver and Dad's most trusted employee. As we drove off, they waved goodbye. "Be good," Mom called after me. The journey from Lagos to Ibadan felt longer than I expected. I passed the time reading road signs, following Dad's advice to avoid travel sickness. When we finally arrived at a grand duplex with a towering gate, I knew we had reached Auntie Bisola's house. The gate swung open to reveal her, Auntie Bisola, smiling broadly. She looked younger and more vibrant than I remembered. Her bum shorts and spaghetti top hugged her figure, blending effortlessly with her caramel skin. She was gap-toothed, and to my young eyes, she was even prettier than my mom. She invited Mr. Segan inside, but he politely declined, citing his need to return to Lagos. As I followed Auntie Bisola into the house, my eyes were glued to the way her hips moved. The rhythm reminded me of a song my classmate Daniel used to hum during math class whenever our teacher turned to write on the whiteboard. 17, 18, 19, 20? "Yemi, what's on your mind?" Her voice jolted me back to reality. Nothing, Auntie." "You miss home?" she asked. "Yes, Auntie," I replied, noticing we were already in the living room. Moments later, Merlin and Ella ran down the stairs to welcome me. Their excitement made me feel right at home. After showing me to my room, Auntie Bisola asked me to freshen up and join them for lunch. She had prepared native soup and starch, both delicious. She wasn't just beautiful, she was also a great cook. Later, the 3 of us, Ella, Merlin, and I, headed to the playroom. Ella suggested we play a game called Police Catch the Thieves. Merlin played the police while Ella and I were the thieves. At one point, Ella pulled me into a wardrobe and locked the door. What happened next changed everything. She guided my hand into her pants and then reached for my shorts. I froze, confused and uneasy. Yet, as her fingers lingered, a strange warmth coursed through me. My instincts told me it was wrong, but I ignored them. I liked the feeling. "Good things don't last, though." Merlin's voice rang out. "I know you two are in there. You have the right to remain silent, or whatever you say will be used against you in the court of law." Panicked, I quickly fixed my shorts and we stepped out of the closet. We said nothing. Not a word about it, ever. The next morning, Ella and Merlin dressed in their uniforms for extra classes. I asked if I could join them, but Auntie Bisola said it wasn't necessary since I'd only be there for a few days. I was relieved. After what had happened, the last thing I wanted was to sit in a classroom. When they left, I dozed off in my room and didn't even notice when Auntie Bisola returned. Yemi? Yemi? Dayemi? The voice rang out, pulling me from sleep. I stretched lazily and turned to the other side of the bed, hoping to drown out the voice, but then it came again. Yemi, please come. It was Auntie Bisola. I quickly jumped out of bed and rushed to her room, which was just opposite mine. Yemi, hand me the towel, please, she called softly from the bathroom. I picked up the white towel resting on her bed and approached the bathroom door, expecting her to stretch out her hand to collect it. Instead, she flung the door wide open. Her nakedness struck me like a lightning bolt, blinding and unforgettable. It was the first time I had seen the bare body of a fully grown woman. I froze, my eyes catching details I had never imagined. Details that were nothing like the smoothness I'd seen on Ella's body when she made me touch her. Thank you, she said casually, taking the towel. I turned sharply and hurried toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But just as I reached it, her voice stopped me. Yemi, are you bored? No, Auntie, I replied, my gaze fixed firmly on the floor. Was she thinking I was still a child? I wondered. Okay, fine, I was only 12. But I had feelings too, feelings I didn't quite understand. Yemi, she called again, this time with a softer tone that compelled me to turn. I faced her respectfully, lowering my eyes like a proper Yoruba boy should when speaking to an elder. Thank God, she was already in her underwear, a leopard print panty that barely covered her curves. I bought your mother the Agbo sticks she requested. Remind me to pack them in your bag before you leave, she said, walking towards her dressing mirror with the careless elegance of someone completely at ease in her skin. Her breasts jiggled with every step, and her exposed cleavage made it hard for me to look away. But it was her backside, barely covered by the thin fabric, that mesmerized me the most. Did you hear what I just said? She snapped, jolting me out of my daze. Yes, Auntie, I stammered. Good. Go back to your room. Ella and Merlin will be home soon. I hurried out and shut the door behind me. But the image of her body lingered, playing in my mind like a forbidden melody. The next day, Auntie Bisola arranged for the driver to take us to the arcade. Ella, Merlin, and I were thrilled, but halfway through the trip, I began to feel a sharp stomach ache. The driver turned the car around and dropped me back home, promising to bring the others back later. I walked into the house, expecting to find Auntie Bisola in the living room. Instead, I was met with chaos, scattered clothes, empty wine bottles, and a pack of cigarettes. I went upstairs to her room, hoping to ask for medicine. But as I approached the door, I heard something strange. Kill me. Kill me. Don't pity me. I froze. Who was she talking to? Uncle Adam, her husband, was on a business trip in China. She should have been alone. Destroy me. Her voice rang out again, even louder this time. Fear gripped me. Was Auntie Bisola in danger? I pressed my ear to the door and heard her moaning. Yes, baby, right there. Yes, Nicholas, hit it. Nicholas. I stepped back in shock. Nicholas? The gateman? How had he managed to get into her room when she never even let him step foot inside the living room? Panic overtook reason, and without thinking, I burst through the door. There they were, Auntie Bisola and Nicholas, naked and tangled in each other's arms. She leaped off the bed in shock, covering herself with a sheet. You fool, she barked at Nicholas, who was scrambling to put on his clothes. Why didn't you lock the gate? Madam, he stammered, but she cut him off with a slap. You're nothing but an embodiment of disaster. Get out of my house. Nicholas pleaded, but she wouldn't hear it. I followed him out, trembling, but before I could leave, Auntie Bisola's voice stopped me cold. Yemi, get back here. For the first time, she yelled at me. I knew I was in trouble. My stomach churned, not from pain but fear. Why aren't you with Ella and Merlin? She demanded. I had a stomach ache, I replied weakly. She softened and handed me some medicine. Sit on the bed, she said. I obeyed, though my heart raced. Yemi, she said gently, you must never tell anyone what you saw here today. Do you understand? Yes, Ma. To be sure. She reached into her wardrobe and pulled out a stick bound in red cloth. Swear on this that if you ever speak of it, your tongue will grow as long as this stick. Terrified, I swore just as she instructed. Good boy, she said, tousling my hair. From that moment, everything changed. She became my secret keeper and my corrupter. She bought me gifts, new clothes, sneakers, and a PS4. She made excuses for me to skip outings with Ella and Merlin, keeping me in her room instead. It started small, touching, caressing, but soon escalated into something darker. She called it lovemaking, but it felt wrong even as my body betrayed me. By the time my holidays ended, I returned to Lagos carrying a burden too heavy for a 12-year-old to bear. I wanted to tell my mom, but she was always too busy to ask how my trip went. And this thing between I and Auntie Bisola went on for years until she died in a motor accident. My mom had sent me away to toughen me up, afraid I'd become a mummy's boy. Instead, I came back as something far worse. I'm 32 now. I may not be a mummy's boy, but I'm a gigolo. I don't feel anything for women my age. They seem like children to me, fragile, inexperienced, unappealing. I crave older women. Their confidence, their dominance, the echoes of Auntie Bisola. You can judge me if you want. Call me an addict, a victim, or even a predator. But understand this, I didn't choose this life. I was molded into it, shaped like clay in the hand of a potter. And her name was Auntie Bisola. The end. Take home facts. 1. Please let's say no to child molestation. Child molestation is a form of abuse where an adult or older adolescent exploits a child for sexual gratification. This traumatic experience can have lasting effects, including leading the victim to engage in self-gratification behaviors, e.g. masturbation, at a young age. 2. Be cautious about holiday destinations and peer influence. Shield. Parents must carefully select holiday destinations and monitor the environment their children are exposed to. Avoid leaving kids in the care of untrusted individuals or sending them to places where they may be vulnerable to abuse. Be aware of peer influences. Friends or older acquaintances can also introduce inappropriate behaviors. Parenting tip. Stay actively involved in your child's life and encourage open conversations to protect them from negative influences. 3. Reevaluate parental commands and authority. The traditional parenting statement, "Do whatever you're asked to do and be a good boy or girl," may unknowingly condition children to comply with harmful demands. Modern parenting advice. Teach children to trust their instincts and think critically. Replace the outdated command with backhand index pointing right. Always do what you think is right, and don't be afraid to ask for help when unsure. 4. Avoid nudity or indecent dressing around kids. Prohibited. Exposing children to nudity or inappropriate dressing desensitizes them and can trigger curiosity about adult sexuality too early. Message to parents. Maintain modesty at home. Treat children as innocent minds and avoid exposing them to adult behaviors meant for mature eyes only. Finally, say no to child molestation. Let's build a safer world for our kids.